Day. With 1 year of his presidency now in the books, the president is expected to highlight his accomplishments, including an economy that seems to be clicking on all cylinders. And according to the White House, he will touch on the theme of, quote, building a safe, strong, and proud America. Hello, everyone, and welcome this afternoon to America's News Headquarters. I'm Eric Shawn.
And I'm Arthel Neville. President Trump will also reportedly tout his new immigration reform plan. The White House getting a head start today and making its sales pitch.
The president has listened to both sides. He feels very strongly that in order to ensure that we have border security, in order to ensure that we're able to protect our national security, it's clear that this framework is a step to move in the right direction.
Rich Edson is live at the White House with more. Hey, Rich.
Hey, good afternoon, Arthel. And President Trump is preparing for his first State of the Union address, where he will outline his priorities for his second year in office. Senior administration officials say the president will focus on the economy, on a number of other issues, perhaps like immigration, and a proposal to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure.
The president's also going to make an appeal to Democrats, to make an appeal to say we need to rebuild our country, and to make an appeal that to do infrastructure, we need to do it in a bipartisan way.
A senior administration official says the president will offer a more empathetic tone during this and reaching out in a bipartisan way. The president, though, will also discuss his immigration proposal. The White House has one right now that would extend essentially a pathway to citizenship. It would take about 10 to 12 years for the 1.8 million so-called dreamers, those brought to the United States illegally as children and are now here as adults. The president is offering that in exchange for $25 billion in border wall funding and an end to so-called chain or family-based migration and the visa lottery system. Democrats have rejected that offer. To that, the president has tweeted, quote, Democrats are not interested in border safety and security or in the funding and rebuilding of our military. They are only interested in obstruction. The House Minority Leader, Nancy Pelosi, said the president's plan that was offered to them is essentially a campaign to make America white again. And that's where the negotiations are ongoing right now. Capitol Hill, where groups of Democrats and Republicans trying to figure out a way on immigration and government funding and a host of other issues. Arthel and Eric, back to you.
Rich Edson will take it back here. Meanwhile, President Trump giving a sneak peek at how he's likely to address the issue of immigration in his State of the Union address Tuesday. The president went on Twitter last night touting what he calls a, quote, wonderful deal for dreamers, adding that Republicans want a solution, too. Here's House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
The president just put out a compromise. It really goes to show.
By the way, do you view that as an opening bid, a start of negotiations by the White House?
I view that as an opportunity to really show who's willing to solve this problem. If you want to solve this and not be at this in another 5 or 10 years, you want to do it correctly. And I think that bill has a lot of merit to solving the problem.
Molly Hinneberg is live in Washington now with details of the plan. Hi, Molly.
Hi, Arthel. The president has offered not just permanent residence for Daca recipients and those who qualified for Daca but didn't apply, but also a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million of them. And as Rich Edson was saying, he also wants $25 billion for the borders. And that does not sit well with some Democrats and independents who caucus with them.
Where the bad part comes is the idea of a wall, which I thought was a great idea in the 15th century when China built the Great Wall. Not so smart today when we have technology that is much more effective and more cost-effective in terms of protecting the border. So I think you're going to see a lot of debate about how much money we should spend on border security.
One Republican senator says the wall won't go where it doesn't need to go.
You need wall systems, you need roads, you need redundancy, you need to fix old fencing. So we're not going to build a 1,900-mile wall, but $25 billion can be spent wisely.
But other Republicans say the president is going too far with citizenship for the people who didn't even sign up for Daca.
They're saying we're going to let 1 million other people apply. It will probably be a lot more than that because of fraud. So if they want to talk about the Daca folks who are in the program now, that's one thing, but they don't. Again, they want to give amnesty to more than twice as many people as President Obama did.
Arkansas GOP Senator Tom Cotton, a longtime critic of providing a path to citizenship before border security, has said that the president's plan could be acceptable, quote, as long as we responsibly stop the future illegal immigration and unfair chain migration. Arthel?
Thanks, Molly Hinneberg. Eric?
Well, I thought with the future of immigration reform expected to be a major topic on Tuesday night. Will the president convince Democrats to come to the negotiating table at that? And can he mollify members of the base who are outraged at the possibility of giving citizenship to nearly 2 million illegals? Let's talk about that with Niall Stanage. He's White House columnist for The Hill. So, Niall, you remember President Reagan's addresses, he would stress a policy. That would move the public watching Tuesday night. And then on Wednesday morning, the congressional offices would get bombarded with phone calls and letters and this sort of thing. Do you think something similar can happen when the president lays out his plans for immigration on Tuesday night?
There is the potential for that to happen. Clearly, Eric, the president is going to make the argument that his proposal is fair in the sense that it provides some things that Democrats want, specifically a pathway to citizenship, and also some things that Republicans want. I think the problem with the pattern you just sort of suggested is, are there persuadable voters on this issue? Immigration, as we know, is a very, very divisive issue. Can the president move public opinion in his favour in the way that you suggest?
So basically, you were saying both sides are entrenched. And how does he mollify the base, as I said, who are not happy with that possibility?
That's a great question. It's interesting that we have seen some conservative groups come out quite strongly against this proposal. They see the pathway to citizenship as an amnesty for illegal immigrants. Now, I saw, for example, a member of the administration today talking about the fact that there were other conservatives who are on board with this idea. I think the president will have to call on his deal-making abilities to persuade people in his base that the price here is worth paying.
And you also talk about price. That brings me to the economy. And we have a recent Fox News poll that's actually pretty surprising. It shows all 40% think the economy is better. Look at the bottom number. It only says 34%, or about a third, think the economy is the same. But, you know, you got the GDP up 2.6%, consumer confidence at a high of 17 years, unemployment down 17 years. You got the $1,000 Trump, gifts that corporations are giving out, and more corporations coming back, that repatriation, the billions that is expected. What does the president have to do to get that message out to the public on Tuesday night about the economy?
To my mind, Eric, the actual occasion of Tuesday night presents him with a great opportunity in this respect. I know he's the Twitter president. He communicates directly on social media a lot. But a State of the Union address is still a massive opportunity for any president. We could be looking here at a TV audience, maybe 35, 40 million Americans. So that provides an extraordinary platform to make his case, to really say that his policies have improved the financial lives of the people. Now, clearly, as we say, it's a polarised country. There are people who are opposed to him, come what may. But the ability to talk to that number of people is itself extraordinary.
And you talk about Twitter. In a sense, Twitter is really like a little State of the Union every time he tweets. I mean, you got 3 or 4 of them, early every morning. How has that changed the relationship that we as the American public have with the presidency when you have that constant direct communication versus everyone sitting around in the living room at night, waiting for FDR's radio speech or waiting for the vision of the future from the President of the United States for the next year?
On one hand, the pomp and circumstance that is around a State of the Union address remains. I think the sense of occasion remains. The atmospherics are very grand and impressive in and of themselves. Twitter is certainly something that the president has used in a very effective way, some people would say. I know his detractors don't like what he tweets, but he has used that to sort of send out a message each day. A State of the Union is still an opportunity to provide a longer, cogent case about an entire agenda, and I think that's what we'll see him try to do.
And finally, we're focusing on President Trump, but it's kind of intriguing that Representative Joe Kennedy of the Kennedy family, the dynasty, he will be giving the Democratic response. Young guy, said to be a young up-and-coming star. He's from Massachusetts, Brookline. What is the significance now, do you think, of the fact that the Democratic Party have chosen not one of the old lions, but someone who bears the Kennedy name and has that lineage?
Well, part of the significance, as you say, Eric, is who he isn't. Congressman Kennedy is not considered a top-tier candidate for the 2020 nomination. I think Democratic leaders would face accusations of bias if they'd chosen some of the more prominent contenders. But clearly his name, there's glamour to that name in American politics, and it is an opportunity for him to increase his profile to an even greater extent than he has done recently.
Well, we'll see about the first Trump State of the Union and the first look for many in the country at a new generations of the Kennedys, all on Tuesday night. Niall, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
And, of course, you can catch it all on Tuesday night here on the Fox News Channel. Complete coverage of the State of the Union address beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern. Brett and Martha anchoring from Washington. Certainly, we will not miss it. Martha?
Absolutely not. Well, casino mogul Steve Wynn is stepping down as finance chairman for the Republican National Committee. Wynn's decision coming one day after a report outlining several sexual harassment and assault allegations against him. Lawmakers today weighing in on his resignation and the more than $1 million Wynn has given Republicans the last several years. Ellison Barber has more on that reaction from Washington.
Steve Wynn is walking away from his job at the RNC, but not admitting guilt. In a statement provided to Fox News, he said he is resigning to avoid a, quote, distraction for the party. RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel released a simple statement, a single sentence, saying she'd accepted Wynn's resignation. Wynn, a billionaire casino mogul, is accused of pressuring employees to engage in sex acts with him. The Wall Street Journal says they interviewed dozens of people who have worked at Wynn's casinos, and what they found was a decades-long pattern of sexual misconduct.
I think they're very serious allegations and should be treated as such.
Wynn has contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to Republican candidates and committees. Public records show that over the years he's made donations to both Democrats and Republicans. The New York Times says the contributions amount to more than $5.2 million. As the Republican National Committee's finance chair, Wynn has helped the RNC raise even more than that. Democrats are calling on the RNC to return any money they've received from the billionaire, pointing out that Republicans called on Democrats to return money they received from Harvey Weinstein. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says the RNC chair should have time to look into the allegations, and if they're true,
should return the money like we ask of the Democrats.
In a statement, the DNC said, quote, in the exact words of RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, if you stand somebody who treated women with the absolute highest level of disrespect. Wynn says the allegations against him are preposterous and he's never assaulted a woman. Arthel?
Ellison Barber, thank you.
And some tragic news. 5 people have been killed. A gunman opened fire at a small-town car wash. This occurred near Pittsburgh overnight. It happened in Melcroft, about 50 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Happened at 3 in the morning. Police right now trying to determine if the shooter escaped or if the gunman or woman is one of the bodies found at the scene. The victims are identified only as 3 men and 2 women. A motive for that shooting is still under investigation at this hour. Arthel?
Eric, protests across Russia against the upcoming presidential elections, and now Vladimir Putin's most vocal opponent is under arrest. The latest straight ahead in a live report. Plus, Iran is releasing an American citizen it has held in jail for almost 2 years, but it's only temporary. Details on this developing story up next. This is a Fox News alert. Fox News confirming Iran has freed an 81-year-old Iranian-American businessman it has held in prison since 2016, but it's only for 4 days because of his deteriorating health. Bakir Namazi had been arrested as he arrived in Iran to visit his son, who is serving a 10-year sentence for, quote, collaborating with a foreign government. The U.S. has been in back-channel discussions with Iran to release the Namazis. Heather Nauert of the State Department tweeting, quote, we welcome the release of Bakir Namazi given his deteriorating health, But we note that his release is only temporary. We call for the immediate and full release of the Namazi family, including his son Simek, as well as other Americans unjustly held by the Iranian government. Joining me now, Michael Hanlon, Director of Foreign Policy Research at the Brookings Institute. Michael, how big a deal is this for the Trump administration, and how does this position President Trump for his meetings with UN Security Council officials that's coming up on Tuesday?
Good afternoon. Well, it's not a big deal. You know, it's an 81-year-old guy who should not have been held in the first place and who's only going to be temporarily given this medical reprieve or break. This is the sort of thing that should be a no-brainer for the Iranian government. I'm surprised they're just letting him out for 4 days, because you would have thought, as harmless as this elderly man obviously is, they would have wanted to give the appearance of being humanitarian and reasonable, because, as we know, President Trump is trying to persuade other countries to get tougher on Iran in one way or another. And the more that Iran can do to soften its image without having to give up anything meaningful, you would think that would be the game they'd want to play. So I'm disappointed that it's just for 4 days, and I don't consider it a big deal in any event.
I understand your point there. So, Michael, how do U.S. and UN diplomats reconcile with Iran as long as you have the conflicting views of the Islamic Republic hardliners and those of Iran's President Hassan Rouhani, remaining as a major political barricade?
Well, no doubt. And I think we all know that as much as one might hope for a long-term improvement in U.S.-Iran relations, starting with better behavior by the Iranian regime, that's not something we can expect in the short term or even the medium term. And so I think for President Trump, the dilemma is this. As we all know, he doesn't like the Iran nuclear deal, but most of his cabinet seems to think that now that we've got it, we're better off sticking with it than not having it. However, how do you push back against Iran in all the other domains of its aggressive behavior, from human rights at home and, again, with the prisoner issue that we're seeing today, to its activities in Yemen and Iraq and Syria and beyond? We've got to have a regional strategy that pushes against Iran. And also then President Trump would like to have some of the limitations of the Iran nuclear deal become permanent, because, as you know, a lot of them start to expire in 6 or 8 or 10 years. And so those are the two big areas where the Trump administration is trying to create this international sense of the need to put more pressure on Iran. I hope we don't pull out of the nuclear deal, because I think it will be a situation where we are seen as the violator of an accord that on its own very narrow terms Iran is essentially complying with. But they're not complying with decent norms of international behavior in other aspects of their Middle East policy, and that's where we've got to get tougher.
Well, I'm going to follow up in a second, but let me tell you this first. According to reporting by Fox News' Jennifer Griffin, there are more than a dozen other Americans held in North Korea, Turkey, Afghanistan, Syria, Mali, and Yemen, and Venezuela. And getting back to Iran, Michael, FBI agent Robert Bob Levinson has been held captive off the coast of Iran for almost 11 years. And I wonder, you don't seem to be too optimistic, but will today's turn of events lead to the release, possibly, of other American prisoners? I mean, Mr. Levinson's family has been talking about his poor health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one would have to assume the answer is no, that we should not be optimistic, because these prisoners have been held for so long on such flimsy pretexts that the idea that somehow a 4-day reprieve for an 81-year-old man is going to lead to any general softening of prisoner policy is pretty optimistic. So, no, I don't expect that. Frankly, I'm surprised at the Iranian regime. I would have thought, even being, in many cases, the thugs that a lot of them are, they would have seen prisoner release as a way to soften their image and therefore improve their odds of not getting all this other international pressure the Trump administration is trying to apply. But apparently that's not something they're prepared to do at this juncture.
If you could sum up for me in about 30 seconds, Michael, so what should President Trump and his Security Council counterparts or advisors, I should say, what do they say to Iran at this point? As you're pointing out, okay, yeah, you let an 81-year-old very sick man out. That's really not a great gesture. So how can the president get tough on Iran and make it stick?
Well, it's got to be country by country and issue by issue. So with 30 seconds, I'll just give you one example. Here we are in Iraq, having largely defeated the Islamic State. And I give a lot of credit to President Trump and to President Obama, and most of all to our men and women in uniform who worked with Iraqis to do that over the last 2 to 3 years. But now we have to help Iraq get stable so it's not as vulnerable to Iranian adventurism. And what that means is we need to encourage the government in Iraq to reach out across Sunni, Shia, Kurdish lines and do the kind of reconstruction program for their country that they really need in a way that everybody gets buy-in and everybody gets benefit. So we should stay engaged in Iraq. We should keep some troops there as trainers. We should keep giving some economic aid, which they desperately need, partly to get our own influence to a point where we can, basically help this country be a little bit more cohesive so it's less vulnerable to Iran's games. Iran plays games where there's weakness and chaos, and it can divide one person against another. So Iraq is at a juncture. We've got to help the Iraqis get stronger.
Got it. Michael Hanlon, thank you for your analysis. I have to leave it there. Thanks, Michael.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And in Russia, the opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been jailed, this time for the 4th time just in this past year. He has been calling for nationwide protests against the presidential election there in March. As you know, Vladimir Putin is widely seen as a lock to win re-election. And Navalny, who's been blocked from the ballot, is urging supporters to boycott the vote. Amy Kellogg following this for us this afternoon from Milan, Italy. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Eric. Well, what Navalny is hoping is that a low voter turnout will erode some of the legitimacy of this upcoming election that nobody doubts President Vladimir Putin will win. Navalny is getting a lot of traction, Eric, with young people, many of whom have known only one president for their entire lives, and that would be Putin, who has really run the show for 18 years and is expected to run it for another 6. Now, Navalny is Russia's most popular opposition figure, but as you mentioned, he's been barred from running for president this March due to what many call dubious fraud charges. His supporters scuffled with police today, tried to break into the detention facility he was taken to after he was arrested. They chanted slogans about elections they claimed are already stolen from them.
This is just outrageous that Navalny is not allowed to run for president. There is no democracy. What sort of thing is this? We are already tired of Putin.
Navalny was predictably arrested on his way to the march today. He said, quote, "This means nothing. This is not about me. It's about your future." Earlier, his offices were raided by police who said they were checking out a bomb threat. Navalny's team was broadcasting about today's events at the time they were taken off the air, but not before calling for the police to step in front of their cameras and show themselves. Navalny, Eric, has really been pretty much visible on the scene for at least 7 years now. He's known for calling out corruption and for naming Putin's party the party of, quote, crooks and thieves. He is, as you mentioned, intermittently in and out of jail, and even was attacked last year with some green paint or acid that partially blinded him, mercifully just temporarily, in one eye. But he says despite all of this, he won't be cowed, and he's not going to give up, Eric.
All right, Amy, it seems the iron hand of Vladimir Putin continues. Thank you. Martha?
3 years after the scandal broke about deadly delays in getting medical care to our brave veterans, some VA hospitals are still among the worst in the country. The disturbing details still ahead. Plus, it is the potential interview everyone is talking about. Will President Trump sit down face-to-face with special counsel Robert Mueller? And the battle over releasing an Obama-era surveillance memo may come to a head this week as the House Intelligence Committee gets ready to vote on making it public. How could this impact the Russia investigation?
President Trump's first State of the Union, from where our nation stands right now to his big plans for America. Watch as Brett Baer and Martha McCallum anchor.
Well, a House panel could vote as soon as tomorrow on releasing that FISA memo that Republicans are calling explosive. They say the so-called Nunes memo, as in House Intelligence Chair Devin Nunes, well, it outlines alleged surveillance abuses by the FBI and the Justice Department. And critics say it shows misconduct that targeted the Trump campaign. The document also reportedly deals with the unverified Trump dossier that was compiled by former British spy Christopher Steele, prepared on then candidate Donald Trump for the research firm Fusion GPS. Democrats, though, are branding this move as purely political and say the information is classified and should not at all be made public. But Republicans beg to differ.
There's nothing in this memo that the department is not already aware of. If you think your viewers want to know whether or not the dossier was used in court proceedings, whether or not it was vetted before it was used, whether or not it's ever been vetted, if you are interested in who paid for the dossier, if you're interested in Christopher Steele's relationship with Hillary Clinton and the Democrat National Committee, then yes, you'll want the memo to come out.
Let's bring in our panel on this. Alexander Smith, the Executive Director of America Rising PAC, and Wendy Asfaro is a political commentator, professor at Johns Hopkins University, and contributor to The Hill. Welcome to you both. Alexander, let me start with you. Do you think the FISA memo should be released?
Well, I think so, because I think one of the most important parts about our institutions, particularly the branches that serve under the departments that serve under the executive branch, is credibility. That's how they're able to enforce the law. And so if there has been misconduct, the American people should be aware of that to make their own judgments. I think, though, we could see, going back to the summer of 2016, that there was clearly a pattern of favoritism when it came to the Hillary Clinton campaign over Donald Trump. If you look at the 4th of July weekend interviews, or them sort of turning a blind eye to them destroying BlackBerries and other devices that contain classified information, I think that we could see that there was clearly some treatment given to the Hillary Clinton campaign that the Trump campaign or any other citizen wouldn't have benefited from.
Wendy, do you think that's the case? And do you think this memo should stay locked up?
No, this is just another towel in the string of mosaic that is them trying to derail this investigation. We have found that some of the information within this memo is completely based on speculation and could be something that is a danger to national security. And that is the issue here. This is not something that we can paint with a broad brush and say everyone in the FBI did not do their jobs or they were sending texts and emails. No, there are members in the FBI who put their lives on the line and make sure that our country is safe. That term of fidelity, of bravery, integrity that the FBI is known for continues to stand today. So again, this memo here is just another way that we are trying to distract and throw a smoke signal to say that this investigation is not doing what it's supposed to do.
Well, you know, there is no doubt that the FBI, the Bureau, our law enforcement, that we owe them a debt of gratitude in this country, that put their lives on the lines for us, for our freedom, and to protect us. But I mean, Wendy, what about the you know, what's been raised by some of the Republicans who say they've read this? It's classified, so they can't say what's in it. But, you know, they've said it's, quote, explosive, and that the American people should find out about it.
I think the American people should have knowledge, but then again, a lot of the information from what we are hearing is speculation, and that is the issue. Not everyone is going to look at this and say, well, some of this information is true and some is not. They're going to take it as this is a fact, and that is going to be the issue. We're going to create conspiracy theories within our own nation, and we do not need that. We don't need to be divided. We need to come together as a country, and this memo is divisive. And on top of that, it's not completely correct or accurate, and that is the issue we're having here.
Alexander, I mean, if this does come out, do you think it would cause more divisions, or would people have a clearer look behind the curtain at this investigation?
Well, I think that we're doing so much time speaking about a memo that none of us has really seen. And I think that that's precisely the point, is that for our institutions to maintain the credibility that they need to enforce the laws of the United States, that they need to have transparency. And this doesn't take away from the tremendous sacrifice that so many brave men and women who serve in our armed forces and in our police, you know, our law enforcement, like the FBI, the sacrifices that they make. I think that it adds to their credibility to show transparency and to acknowledge when misconduct has occurred.
And, you know, it's interesting, Stephen Boyd, the Assistant Attorney General, Wendy, at the final point, he has said that they should be given the opportunity for the FBI and the DOJ to look at it, although he says it could damage national security. So, I mean, could it be released in a redacted form? You don't reveal the sources and methods. You know, you got a lot of blacked out paragraphs maybe, but at least something could then come out that the American public would want to know.
Absolutely, and I think that that is actually a happy medium, and that's a good compromise, because the whole issue surrounding this is whether or not there will be issues of national security. So if we're able to sit here and say, okay, let's make sure we give this to the FBI, to our officials to look through this and redact some information, that is a better approach than just to release this completely and wholly to the public.
Alexander, last word?
I completely agree. I mean, I think that we need to put the interest of national security first, but to the extent that transparency can be achieved by these institutions, I think that it only helps in sorting out problems that might exist like they do in any institution and making sure that they have credibility going forward in the future to enforce the law.
All right, we'll see what happens if they do indeed have that vote tomorrow and if the American public will ever eventually see it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Of course. Arthel.
Eric, thank you. President Trump has said taking care of our veterans is one of his top priorities, but some VA hospitals continue to rank among the worst in the country, including in Arizona, 4 years after the scandal broke that dozens of veterans in the Phoenix VA system reportedly died waiting for care. Will Carr has the story out of L.A.
4 years after scandal rocked the VA, President Trump continues to pledge that care will improve for veterans.
We've already made tremendous strides in delivering for our veterans, including passage of long-awaited veterans accountability legislation.
In fact, the VA's end-of-year internal ratings show significant gains for many hospitals. But in Phoenix, considered ground zero in the 2014 scandal after dozens of veterans died while waiting for care, the facility once again ranked as one of the worst in the country in 2017. The report gave Phoenix 1 out of 5 stars for the second year in a row.
We are worlds away from where we were in 2014. I think it's, the veterans were regaining their trust, even though it's one veteran at a time.
Rima Nelson, the 7th director to run the Phoenix VA since the scandal broke, took over in October of 2016.
You got a 1 out of 5 the year before, so when you talk about trust, when you talk about the thoughts of the veterans here in Arizona, why are the improvements not happening faster?
They need to happen. We all know that. And we still have a lot of work to do. Our work is incomplete.
Nelson touts a dramatic drop in patient wait times, slashing the duration to get an appointment over the last year from an average of 30 days down to just 11. But in a statement, Arizona Senator Jeff Flake tells Fox News, "I am truly disappointed in the continued poor performance at the Phoenix VA. Clearly, greater oversight is necessary."
I am disappointed because we're not where we are. I mean, we want to rate ourselves a 10. We're not there yet. We have a lot of work to do.
Would you feel comfortable getting your health care at the facility here?
Absolutely. I would absolutely be comfortable getting my health care here.
Another positive out of Arizona, one of the original Phoenix whistleblowers, Brandon Coleman, has been promoted to the new VA Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection in D.C.
We're taking a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach, and that's a big change.
And part of that change includes Coleman and members of the new protection office traveling across the country to meet with whistleblowers and doing what they can to help resolve their issues. Arthel.
Will Carr, thank you. Eric?
Well, Arthel, immigration will likely be a major theme of the president's first State of the Union address on Tuesday night. This is there's a full court press by the White House and Congress to try and come up with a solution to Daca. With a major stopgap measure to fund the government expiring soon, can they make a deal?
If my Democratic friends will calm down, I know it's hard to deal with President Trump. Let's take a deep breath. We can get there. America would be so well served